Hello, everybody, my patient audience. Okay, so this show, welcome to The Reason We Learn, by the way. For those of you who are new here, and I'm speaking as much to anyone watching on the replay as anybody here now, I hope you will go ahead and smash that like button and consider subscribing to the channel if you like this sort of content, if you want to learn more about what's going on in our schools today. As horrifying as it may be to you, please consider subscribing to the channel so you can find out when I make new videos. I do make several a week. Today's video is going to be me reacting to something that actually ran live yesterday. It is a webinar put on by the U.S. Department of Education for their Equity Summit. Now, I watched the whole thing yesterday and I recorded the screen because they are not putting this out there for the world to see. You had to register, and it was aimed at educators primarily. It was not for parents. That's not to say there weren't other parents who found out about it and went, but that's not what its purpose was. So I was listening as an educator and as a parent, obviously, because you can't ever take that hat off. But I was listening as an educator because they were speaking to educators. And my goal today will be to translate some of the word salad for you. Some of it, maybe I can translate into layman's terms. That's just educatorese, possibly. But most of it, I'm going to be translating from word salad to English because it doesn't even translate into some separate professional vocabulary. What happened was when I recorded it, of course, it made a giant file. The giant file has taken a very long time to export. It actually just finished exporting into a smaller file. And now I'm going to upload it to YouTube where I will host it privately. But that way, what I can do is kind of speed up their talking a little bit. And yes, you made it for the salad to English translation. But here's where it's going to get dicey, I think, is that I have to hope the uploading of this to YouTube, where I will then be able to show it to you and react to it, is not going to make me go all robot glitchy. Because even though I have super fast internet, I've never done this before. I've never tried to stream live while uploading a file that is approximately 2 gig in size. Now, before you get scared, even though it's an hour and a half webinar, I'm probably not going to watch the whole thing, but I couldn't quite figure out where to, if I wanted to cut it off, and I didn't want to edit it in parts in the middle because I didn't want you wondering what did she remove. So I just might kind of fast forward through some bits that I know are particularly boring. But my goal is to go through this and just give you some insight into what they're talking about at the federal level. Now, while this is uploading, let me give you a quick education on what the U.S. Department of Education is not permitted to do, okay? They're not permitted to dictate curriculum to the states. They can't do that. They can't create a national curriculum. It's just not allowed. States' rights and all. Oh, gosh. This is what I was afraid of. Okay, if I glitch a little, it's because I'm uploading. I am sorry. So they can't create a national curriculum. So the way they get around this is they create funding opportunities, grants, big blocks of money for the purpose of doing specific things that the administration wants states to do with education. And I pretty much believe that when Jimmy Carter created it, that's why he did it, as a gimme to the unions that helped him get elected at the time, to say, hey, I know we can't set a national curriculum and we can't set national standards. We can't set national pay scales. We can't do all these things that you really want. But what we can do is make sure there's a way to infuse money into the states, targeted at positions that are your members. And this is what we're going to do. So every time you hear of something like No Child Left Behind, Common Core, IDEA, Title I, these kinds of things, these are funded by the federal government. The states have to go get the money. They have to sort of say, we need it, and here's why. They get it, and they have to spend it for that purpose. And if anything they don't spend in that year for that purpose, they have to give back. Okay. So they make pretty sure to spend it. They also make pretty sure to get it. So if money is put out there for them, they want to have it because it's money, right? It's our money. Currently, there's something called Civic Secures Democracy Act that Biden is trying to get passed. I don't think it's been passed yet, but it's going to. Oh, I'm so sorry, DeVille. Yes, I wish I could give you all a pep talk. I wish I could give you all a pep talk. Maybe we'll do that. We'll spend a little time doing that. So what the Civic Secures Democracy Act would do is ask Congress for $1 billion, which will probably end up being a lot more than $1 billion because that's how it always works out. It, goes through all their little voting and everything. And then they say, oh, we it's really going to cost this much more. And it would be for the purpose of giving grants to states and their schools to teach civics, which, like racism, has been redefined recently, like all these words like inclusion and diversity and equity. And what civics would mean, according to the Biden administration, is the teaching of the 1619 Project specifically. They name it by name. Anti-racist education, equity education, things like this. That's what they would call civics. Unfortunately, an idiot Republican decided to sign on to this rule, this act, whatever it is, thinking civics sounds good, doesn't have any clue what he's doing. Either that or the Republicans are even more mendacious than I thought. So that's coming down the pike. I think it's probably going to happen. And that makes it that much more urgent for us to either get our kids out of the schools or understand what's going on. This summit, this equity summit, I think was convened to speak to educators. So college and university professors who teach teachers, to let them know that this administration is committed to equity. Well, what does that mean? What do I think it means? You'll see what they think it means when I finally get this thing uploaded. Well, I think it means finding new and creative ways to get federal money and influence into the states without directly violating states' rights. I think they're going to talk about things being so necessary to achieve this racial equity, social justice, all this, that they really like rebuilding all the schools. They talk about that. Most schools were built in 1960s. We need to just rebuild them. So this is going to be like a big infrastructure project. I can see them trying to come up with money to do that. And they want things like healthcare centers on site at schools. They want things like counseling centers right there on site at schools. They seem to want to make the school the center of your community, not just in terms of physically it's right about in the middle of your town. I think they want to have the school dominate the life of the American family. Soup to nuts. Like, take your kids in at age 3, what they're going to call universal preschool, and pretty much have your child in their custody 8 hours a day until they're 18 years old. And if they need to see a counselor, it will conveniently be provided by the government counselor at the school. Oh, they need some health care that we're not going to tell you about? We have this lovely health center adjacent to the school because equity. So they talk a lot about student needs. And what I'm hoping you'll hear, and again, I'm so sorry that this is taking a while, but what I'm hoping you'll hear, I think it's about done, is that they want to parent your kids. And what they describe as a need, the students' needs, we need to understand their individual needs. We understand their home life. We need to reach out to the parents and bring the parents in for more education for the parents. I think they genuinely believe they are the parents of the country. That I didn't hear anything that indicated there is any input responsibility from the students or their actual parents. I kept listening for it. Like, where's the part about accountability and input from the family, from the home, from the child, him or herself? It makes these kids sound like they are lumps of clay who come to school full of problems, full of problems. Like all they get from the outside world and their families is trauma, problems, poverty. Just they make this country, to me, make it sound like 90% of our public school students are basket cases, just like living horrendous lives, and that the school is there to save them. And the other thing I noticed that was kind of missing in a really glaring way was any mention whatsoever of the hang on one second. I'm going to try to get this going here. I don't need to do that. This is going to go, I'm going to put this on private because I don't want the whole rest of the world to see it. There's nothing about the families or the kids or anything. And they seem to think it's their job to do everything. No mention of skills. No mention of skills whatsoever. Okay, so let me get this pulled up so I can get it going. And it is, it's rough, guys. That's the other thing I'm going to tell you is that it is rough in the sense that they, okay, there it is, webinar, YouTube. All right. There's a bump in the middle where I had to stop the recording and keep going. So I'll try to, get past that. But all right, here we go. I think I'm going to be able to do this. Here we go. Let me share this screen. And I hope it doesn't echo. I'm going to put my headphones on so that I don't echo either. So wait a second. All right. Okay. And here we go. Wait, I want this one, window. Okay. So can you guys give me a thumbs up that you can see it? Everything clear? Is it good? Oh no, I'm an ableist now? Okay. Can somebody give me a thumbs up that you guys can see this video? Yes? Are we good? All right. I just want to know that you can see it before I go hitting play. Can somebody type in the comments? Yes, we can see it. Thank you. Okay. All right. So what you're going to see first is, as you can see, our first lady. Now, I came in after it had started with her talking. So we're jumping in a little bit. And she just says her little thing. We'll listen to her for a second. If it's too boring, I'll turn it off. Also, I want to make sure you guys can hear it. So that's the other thing. I want to make sure you can hear it. Okay. So I'm going to need a thumbs up to tell me you can hear it. Can you hear it? Okay. So just everybody can hear her, right? She said preschools for 3 and 4-year-olds. You can't hear it. You can't hear it. Uh-oh. No hearing. Oh, God. This is a problem. How can I make sure you can hear it? All right. Hold on one second. I'm going to find out from the StreamYard powers that be. Yeah, that's what I'm wondering is how do I make sure that you guys can hear what's going on my computer? No, this is going to be a disaster if I can't get you to hear it. What a disaster. Hold on a second. Negatory. All right. Thank you. Hold on. I got to look this up now. I should have figured this out before because I can hear on Zoom. I can do it, but on this, I'm not sure. Okay. Computer sound sharing on StreamYard. Okay. So let's see. Let me see if I can figure this out. I am so sorry, you guys. So the gist of it is that they want to make preschool available for everybody. And then, hold on, I'm going to stop sharing and try to do this. Okay. I know it's possible because I've seen other people do it. Here we go. Blue share screen. In the pop-up, choose Chrome tab to share audio. Select the Chrome tab with you. Got it. Okay. I think we're good. All right. Let me go back to this. Share screen. Chrome tab. Share audio. Except it's not the Chrome tab. It's not a Chrome tab. Uh-oh. Now I got to open it in Chrome? That's not going to work. Then how am I going to see? All right. I guess I'll have to do that. YouTube. Here's the problem. I don't know if I'm going to be able to see you guys. Hold on. They're making me open this in Chrome is the problem. Close. All right. YouTube. Why isn't it opening? I'm super sorry, you guys. No, I can't turn up loud. I can share it. It's just going to take a second because I've got to open it in Chrome. It's making me do that. That's the problem. That's the problem. And with these two things, it's just it's so many windows open. All right. It's going to take a second. All right. Get this tab over here. This tab over here. All right. I think we're good. All right. And just have to get it from my channel. And videos. Okay. What a pain. Okay. Okay. Let's see. All right. Now. Okay. All right. Now, here we go. Tell me if you can hear it.
Have what they need to address disparities by dramatically increasing funding for Title I schools. We're going to make sure that 3- and 4-year-olds have access to preschools. We're going to reimagine how we serve families everywhere, including by creating more community schools.
Did you hear her say more community schools? Okay. Now, community schools could be a great thing. It could be a school inside of a community. I just have a feeling that's not what they mean. And the reason I say that is everything they say after this point. It sounds to me more like rather than we're going to put a school in your community, I feel like they're going to create a community around the school. I know you wish you couldn't hear it, don't you? Okay.
And on the anniversary of the Olmstead Supreme Court decision, let me thank you all for the work you do for students and disabilities.
Okay, this is really annoying to me because the IDEA, which is the main law, the federal law that mandates that students with special needs will get a free and appropriate public education, is unenforced. There is no enforcement arm of this. Okay? So she's bragging about the Olmstead Act. She's talking about how wonderful it is that people get their special needs met, except that they don't. Except that every year parents have to sue, they often lose, and districts literally set aside money to have lawyers on retainers to either settle with them or shut them up or hope that they don't bother to sue because a lot of them are, English language learners, people whose parents don't have the means or even the understanding of how to go about doing this kind of a lawsuit, and they just get away with it because parents are the enforcement arm of this law.
The president is committed to supporting that work by fully funding the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act.
The issue wasn't funding, honey. The issue is oversight. There is no oversight.
Today, we hope to share some of the evidence-based practices and promising strategies that are delivering results for our students.
I had to stop. She said evidence-based practices and strategies. When we get through this, I want you guys to tell me if you heard any evidence and if you heard any like specific strategies
across the country. And we hope that what you hear today will inspire you to bring these ideas back to your own classrooms and schools. All of us have a role to play. The author Bell Hooks wrote, "There can be no love without justice."
What does that have to do with education? What does love and justice have to do with education? There can be no love without justice. Okay, that's a lovely sentiment, but it's absolutely out of context. I don't even understand what that has to do with any of this today. Bring what back to our classrooms? I listened to this entire thing yesterday. I didn't hear a single thing I could bring back to a classroom.
I've always found that love is at the heart of education. Love of learning, love for the world we share for our students.
Really? Sounds a lot like you guys hate the world. Every time I hear teachers talking, you guys, we got to start. We got to get active. We got to really, my science is different. Yeah, I don't like science. This is the white man's tools. This is the master's tools. Oh, we don't want logic and reason and objectivity. And these are bad things. And we got to decenter whiteness and get rid of the canon and classics have to go. And social studies, not history. And you know what? What if we don't even do that? Except we have to teach slavery. But all the other history, Western Europe, everything else, anything good that anyone did who had slightly lighter than tan skin. No, can't do that. That's bad. But we love learning.
And love for the connections we build in our classrooms.
Except with the white students.
And that love must go hand in hand with equal opportunities, with equity for all students.
Equity, you can't give equity for. Like, equity for doesn't make sense. Equity for is that you can't give it. Equity is something you either arrive at or you don't, and you hope to God you don't. Because if you arrive at equity in a civilization, then you are living in Kurt Vonnegut, okay? That is Harrison Bergeron. You can't give it. It's not for students, okay? Equity is not something you can give. They keep getting that wrong.
With a just educational system.
A just educational system. Implication is unjust right now. Now, I got to stop and say, I agree with that a little bit. I agree that it's unjust to know the science of reading for 30 plus years and we've known it longer, we've known over 100, but to switch to something else that doesn't work, that demonstrably doesn't work. You guys, I looked it up the other night, 1979, Black illiteracy was 1.6%. It is now high. I mean, we're down around 30% literacy, full literacy, proficient, 12th grade. That's from 79 to now. That's such a precipitous fall. You cannot attribute that to racism. I'm sorry. We had a black president since then. You cannot attribute it. That has to be intentional. They know how kids learn to read effectively. People keep telling them, you're doing it wrong. And they're just like, nope, it's fine. What are you talking about? It's fine. Boom. Literacy rates fall. The injustice, madam, is that teachers are not teaching people to read, and it's intentional. That's unjust. That's actually criminal.
Thank you for joining us today and for all that you've done to support families in your schools throughout this last year.
You're joking, right? She's joking. She must be joking. All who's done? The members of the teachers union who are watching, the teachers who sat home and complained about parents, the teachers who refused to go to work, the teachers who said, I want free childcare now, even though I've been paid for an entire year while all of my students' families have been like hanging on by a thread. It's not enough. And everyone needs to be vaccinated, even the kids, even though this is still an experimental vaccine. Okay.
Together, I know that we will build the loving, just communities that every student deserves.
Loving and just. I'm sorry. No, we don't want you to love our kids. We want you to respect our children and respect our parental rights and respect their right to the education that you compel them to sit for, that you compel us to pay for. That is why they have a right to it, because otherwise they wouldn't. Instead, you assign all these rights to them. They have a right to safety and a right to not have their feelings hurt and a right to have us call out every microaggression, including a funny look or somebody touch their hair or whatever. They have all these rights that actually aren't rights. You can't ensure and guarantee that someone will not get their feelings hurt at school. And then you turn around and tell them they're an oppressor. So they have, apparently everybody has a right to not have their feelings hurt, except the people you want to have their feelings hurt.
Now it's my pleasure to introduce a dedicated school employee from Walla Walla, Washington, the 2021 Recognizing Inspiring School Employees winner, Mr. Melito Ramirez.
I'm going to skip this because seems like a sweet man, but it's like doesn't add anything to anything. It's like they probably told the teachers union, like, we're going to do this thing for this dude. And, you know, can you, now I'm trying to figure out how we can, oh, we got it. Here we go. I'm skipping the mariachi band. I hope you guys don't mind that I'm skipping the mariachi band. It's like, I could make you watch it and you'd have to super chat me to stop it, just like a restaurant. I'm kidding. Okay. So here is our lovely Cindy Martin. Cindy. Yeah. What is the issue with Cindy? Now, let's see. Let's see if I have it. No, I closed Safari. There was a no to Cindy Martin campaign before she was confirmed by people in her own district out in San Diego, where she was superintendent. And before that, she was an elementary school teacher. So she went from elementary school teacher to superintendent of the district, a huge district. And there was a lot of sketchy stuff going on there, including the potential misappropriation of funds. In fact, I think that there's a fair amount of evidence for that, where she moved funds that were supposed to go for Title I and kind of went to some programs that were not serving Title I students, but they were English, they were Spanish language classes, but they were not really Title I students. I think, I don't know the details, but I'll put up the link to the site. But the bottom line is this woman is not without controversy. Some people believe that she was elevated to this position because she's compromised and would therefore do whatever she's told to do, because there are investigations ongoing into things like, students' sexual harassment that was not sexual assault that was not reported, things that she just swept under the rug, didn't pay attention to, etc. And the irony is, most of the complaints against her are equity related, and we call them equity because that's what they've been called in the district. But what they really are things she's done that actually hurt the very communities she claims to care about in this webinar: the marginalized people, children, students of color, families of color, English language learners, Title I recipients, etc. That most of the claims are about malpractice in that regard. So she's a hypocrite is basically the issue. And she's so sweet about it. She's got that voice of that person that we all remember, the lady who was testifying against Kavanaugh. What is it about women with this voice? I mean, first of all, they're always on the left. And then also they're always like, they're just so sweet, but they're not. They're just
better with urgency.
Wait here. I'm sorry. Get it back up.
Muchas gracias. That was a great performance. Thank you for sharing your talents. I'd now like to turn the program over to Deputy Secretary of Education, Cindy Martin.
Doesn't he look like a Muppet? He totally looks like a Muppet. I'm right? He looks like a Muppet.
Cindy has fought for equity throughout her career. Prior to
overcome those barriers.
Oh, sorry.
Instruction, services.
I suck at this, you guys. I'm not Carlin yet. Oh, her microphone didn't work. I forgot this. Look, she's talking and nothing's happening because her microphone didn't work.
Schools and children. I'd like to take a moment right now to acknowledge the historic marking of Juneteenth as a federal holiday this weekend. And it's an important moment to remember for our nation, and important for us to remember to work towards equity. I also want to wish everyone a very happy Pride Month. As you know, the department recently confirmed that Title IX protects students from discrimination based on sexual orientation.
Sorry, girls, your sports are being invaded.
And gender identity. Our schools should protect and welcome all students.
They do. That's not protecting the girls, just so you know.
And the department stands with our students of all identities.
Except girls.
As we work
and cisgendered boys
to reopen schools this summer and fall,
who are heterosexual,
we have an opportunity and we have a responsibility to reflect on teaching and learning and best practices and what did and what didn't work, when we all had to rethink what it meant to be a student, to be a teacher, a principal, and more. And we had to do this on a moment's notice.
How about the parents? Why are the parents always left out in this equation? They'll talk a lot about parents later, like as these sort of pets that they have off to the side who sort of reproduce and give them students. But we had to rethink and we had to reimagine what it was like to be a student. You aren't students. So you can't even, and you didn't want to talk to parents, and you pretty much left parents out in the cold. So what did you learn about being a student in this last year? Nothing.
Almost a year and a half ago. Now, with the benefit of hindsight and, quite frankly, the luxury of foresight, we will build back better with urgency, intentionality.
Intentionality. Is that a word?
And joy in the
joy
service of every single student. To me, equity means that every student gets what they need to succeed in the classroom, and they get it when they need it and in the way that they need it. That is our vision for reopening and beyond for America's students. This commitment is what helped me connect with students as a teacher, build community as a principal, and it helped me successfully reopen San Diego schools this April with a focus on the social, emotional, and academic needs.
Notice how social and emotional came first. The social, emotional, and academic needs. Like, oh yeah, those. Oh, those guys. Yeah. But the social, emotional, and that other stuff.
Of the whole student.
Whole student, by the way, is kind of code for the social emotional learning stuff, parenting your child at school, pretty much everything but academics, shaping and molding your kid's head. That's what whole student is.
I also must recognize that today is the anniversary of the landmark Olmstead decision.
We're going to talk about it some more.
This decision solidified Americans with disabilities' right to access supports and services in the community. And I'm happy to announce that by the end of the summer, the Department of Education will be releasing guidance on the unique challenges and opportunities.
Guidance? They don't need guidance. They need oversight. They don't need guidance. Guidance is useless. Guidance is not actionable. It's like, hey, you probably should do some stuff. Oversight.
In reopening for students with disabilities. It will address some of the most pressing needs and the concerns elevated by families, advocates, and educators to provide clarity and direction and attention to this community.
Yeah, you know what would provide clarity? Knowing that their rights are going to be, respected, and that this law is going to be enforced by somebody other than them. They don't have the time for a second full-time job to go and provide oversight that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. I'm sorry, not you personally, but when you were in San Diego. But since you, the federal government, have created this giant honeypot, and then you send it out to the states and you provide no oversight to make sure they're actually using it for its intended purpose, you're not doing anything. All your guidance is a bunch of words on a piece of paper. It doesn't help. These kids are still going to be facing the same fight.
This guidance you'll see is centered on the lived experience of students who may have experienced the most significant loss in instruction, services, and community connection during the pandemic. And I'm honored to
It's not may have, they did.
Moderate today's discussion on best practices in centering equity in elementary and secondary education with a panel of distinguished practitioners from across our country. We're joined today by a good friend and colleague, Dr. Pedro Noguera, Dean of the Education School at the University of Southern California.
I apologize, guys. He's the one who got cut off, but I can assure you he didn't say anything super meaningful. He is the dean of an education school, so he's responsible for teaching teachers. Now, one thing I will tell you before we get into this, the panelists are not all bad. I mean, I don't want to say bad. I disagree with a lot of them and what they say and what their focus is. Some of them are worse than others. But I do think it's important to remember that these people you're going to hear speaking, I do believe these panelists sincerely believe what they're saying. And I also even believe that some of them do very good things in their work. So in other words, I don't agree with their worldview. And I don't agree with the direction they'd like to take the whole country in terms of education. I don't agree with their emphasis on, social, emotional trauma, all the stuff. However, I don't want to paint them out as like evil people who only do bad things. Okay. I think some of them, the woman who won the Counselor of the Year award, for example, I do believe she probably forms great bonds with the people she works with and does a lot of good for her students. I just happen to disagree with the focus in school on psychosocial development. I don't think it's right for parents to be encouraged to outsource that to the school. And so I think because she's part of that, I disagree with that. But I want to be very clear that I'm not attacking people, except for maybe Cindy Martin. um, but other than that, I think these are well-meaning people just spouting a lot of things I disagree with. And I just want to be clear, okay?
California. And another great colleague and friend, Alberto Carvalho, superintendent of Miami-Dade Schools, and Rosemary Eller, school board president. We're so glad to have you join us. And the whole team that's here, we're going to get started with our panel in just a moment. So well, and I've been a student.
So that's what we got skipped over him because it got cut off.
Having us. So one of the barriers in our community is that we have a very high percentage of concentrated poverty.
So you'll notice the word barrier. Listen for it. Barrier comes up a lot. It's kind of like centering. Barrier is this weird word that has come into the lexicon of education that doesn't seem to connect with anything consistent. It seems to be the catch-all phrase for anything that makes it difficult for them to show results that children are learning. And they've decided these are barriers. What they seem to be doing is saying that those barriers are for the school to fix. So there's no mention of problems, challenges or anything. It's all barrier, first of all. That's now the new thing. It used to be issues, now it's barriers. But it's never outside the school, except for poverty. So we have this poverty as a barrier, but that's about the only one you're going to hear about that's outside the school. The rest of them seem to be either in the school or for the school to fix. I never hear anything about, the kid isn't bringing it, or the parents aren't being supportive, or, gang culture, or anything. You'll never hear anything else. The only variable impacting these kids' performance, apparently, are these almighty individuals.
And it shows up in our students' lives daily. However, we had this huge shift from this deficit narrative and saviorism when we started to bring in trauma-informed practices. We recognize that students don't just have ACEs from outside our school, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, but they may come into school and experience trauma.
Yes, I'm sure they do come into school and experience trauma. They do. They experience trauma in their classes, and you're going to see a lot more of that because teachers are literally traumatizing their students. We've seen video.
So what we worked hard to do was embed those trauma-informed practices, work alongside our community to build those, ask families to come in and to educate us on how we can better serve them. And then we also, our superintendent envisioned for us project-based learning. So,
okay, project-based learning, Dewey. This is where, we're going to make, we don't teach kids any rote skills or rote information. Everything's going to be a project that they do. So it's disconnected, but they make it all about working with others and social emotional. And this is going to help the traumatized person because they're working with others. What it usually amounts to is one kid who's really smart does all the work and everybody else stands around or, doing nothing. But they get the same credit for it. And I guess they all feel good about themselves, but they claim it as a success. But if you notice, she hasn't said anything. She's not said anything. I mean, we've sat here and listened to her, we've worked hard to embed trauma-informed practices. Like what? All I heard was project-based learning. I mean, keep listening, but I'm still waiting to find out what are these trauma-based practices, trauma-informed practices.
Bringing in our students' lived experiences and then building on those schemas that they already
lived experiences. We could be playing bingo right now.
Have. And that came together really beautifully with the trauma-informed practices that I had been preaching for so long. So
Preaching.
That's just how we've moved forward.
I heard nothing.
Olivia, that's wonderful. You show how you didn't just wake up in the pandemic and figure out, oh boy, we better figure things out. You built on some of the things that you said you've been talking about for so long. And
I heard nothing. Did you hear any of that? Do you feel like she's in an alternate reality from you? I remember when she said, that's so amazing. And you did this and you built on these practices and you didn't just wake up. And I'm like, I feel like she woke up this morning, wrote that, took a bunch of buzzwords, strung them together, put on a big smile, and went on a webinar. And this lady's like, this is awesome. Where are the results? Where's the evidence? Where's the actual practice? What is the practice? I'm not seeing anything. I feel like I'm I'm unmoored. I don't have anything to hold on to here.
And you built on that and then were prepared to meet the moment. And I really love what you said about saviorism, that this isn't about saving people from anybody. This is about how we build a community and work together. And
Build a community. You'll hear that a lot. This isn't about saving anyone. Apparently, it's about just preventing them from needing to be saved by taking care of their every need. You're going to hear all the needs they want to take care of.
This work embedded. And I know, Alejandro, you have some fabulous stories to share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, thank you for having me on this panel. So I teach at Aton Elementary School in Ward 7 of Washington, D.C. And this community is a community that's rich with culture, but has been underserved for so many years. And the Aton community, I mean, it's a wonderful community. And we have found success with leaning into our community members and
leaning in, barriers, lived experience. You're going to hear these over and over. And it's always community, 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 community. You will rarely hear individual, except when you're talking about individual needs. And individual needs is not what you and I would think of as individual needs for like academic, success and so forth. It's individual needs like, I need a ride to school because I do. And I don't have any food at home, so you need to feed me. It's mostly like that.
Bringing families to the table in order to fit the needs of all of our students. And this started about 2 years ago when we were trying to address a chronic absenteeism issue that was going on in our school, where students were missing several days of school, which definitely hindered on their learning. So what we did was we brought students and families to the table and surveyed our families, and we found out a lot of interesting information. And by opening up those doors to our families, we were able to understand that where our school is located is a laundromat desert, meaning that there were no laundry services around.
A laundromat desert.
And it wasn't safe or adequate for our families to travel safely to get those services done. So we reached out to the programs that we knew and some of the resources, and we were able to get laundry services in our school site.
They're providing laundry services in the school now, guys. Isn't that awesome? The kids didn't want to go to school. They were chronically absent because their clothes were dirty. And that's the taxpayer's responsibility, apparently, because they're in a laundry desert.
And we really found success with leaning into our families, and we did that again during
COVID-19.
When we brought families to the table and they shared that they didn't have access to internet or computers, and we were able to get them
Oh, they didn't have stuff.
Access to that, which is so important in a year like this. So, like Olivia said, bringing families to the table and including families as respected stakeholders in this conversation, we were able to make decisions that best fit the needs of our students, which
just is a whole long way of saying they didn't show up. We couldn't figure out why. We found out they didn't have the stuff they needed to show up to the schools that we closed. We closed them. And we told everybody to be very afraid. And now they're at home and they can't get online because they were going to school in person. And because of the situation we created in doing this, yes, they did. They can sit there all day and go, no, it wasn't ever. No, they created this situation. Then now the taxpayers of the United States of America had to provide all of this stuff so that these people could get online and go to school in a totally different format where, by the way, they also still didn't show up 9 times out of 10.
only led to academic growth, but an overall better school experience.
I would love to see that so-called academic growth, because in the beginning, they told us about how much learning loss there was. So they got them internet. So now they had internet to do whatever they want, not just go to school. And they got them, a laundry site at the school, which is kind of interesting because they're not going to the school to learn, but they can go to the school to do their laundry. I'm really confused.
So good to hear that, Alejandro, the way that you leaned in. It must be so affirming.
We leaned in some more. The only thing I will commend him for is at least he told us what they actually did, which is more information than we've gotten so far. And that is that they said, hey, parents, why are your kids not coming to school? Oh, we don't have any laundromat near us and our kids don't have clean clothes. Well, that's absenteeism from coming into school. Then when the pandemic hit, they said, well, we can't get online because we don't have internet. First of all, I'm struggling with that one a little bit, but okay, let's say we believe it. So they didn't have any internet at all. And they got them internet. They probably got them Chromebooks and things like that. But I've heard from so many people who are teachers that kids, even with their free internet, were not showing up. So there still has to be some role to play for the families. And so far what I've heard is, here's why we can't. And I didn't hear much coming back from the school going, yeah, but you kind of can.
For the families and the children that you serve, that you leaned in and didn't assume that you had the answers. And we define equity as students get what they need, when they need it, in the way that they need it. And we know students by name and by need. And your ability to lean in and bring families to the table, like you just said, is so affirming, and giving them exactly the supports they need so that they can access your brilliant teaching. And sometimes for you to be able to do your job well, the kinds of things that had to happen, you solve those. It's wonderful to hear that.
So again, with the leaning in, I think she said it like 4 times, but her definition of equity is kids get what they need when they need it, like on demand. And it's not academic. it's laundry, it's internet, so that they can access his teaching. At what point is it the responsibility of the parents to make sure that their children can access the education? And I realize that people live in, poverty and so forth. But I mean, my grandfather grew up in poverty and managed to get to school. So I guess I don't really understand. That's back when they were washing clothes with like a washboard. And I don't mean to sound cold and cruel and whatnot, but I think we are setting ourselves up. Maybe it's not, they call it, they say they're not in the business of saviorism, but it sounds a little savioristic to me. Maybe I'm reading this wrong.
Your community must just know what a treasure you are. Thank you. And let me move to Alberto and Rosemary and ask this next question. Before we can begin to imagine, you heard the secretary talk about imagining and reimagining the education system, and it's a system that actively fights against inequity. We must take the next best step. And so I'd like to know how you're centering equity for our students who are furthest from opportunity now, particularly students with disabilities, so that we can ensure that they have what they need as they start to re-engage their learning. So maybe talk about what are the ways in which you can get to know each student, like I said, by name and by need, so that you can better understand what they've been through the past year as they start to re-engage learning going forward. And either one, Alberto or Rosemary, you can toss to each other, whoever wants to start.
I'll start. Thank you so much. And thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here on behalf of
I was checking who she was.
First of all, we use a lens of equity in every decision that we make or consider for our children.
I should say that Rosemary is a school board president. Okay. So she's not currently a teacher or a superintendent or something like that. She is a school board person in White Plains, New York.
Children. Every child is an individual, and we seek to eliminate any barrier to their success while in our school district.
Any barrier again.
First of all, for our students with special needs, we seek to educate them in district wherever possible with all the necessary accommodations and support that they need. How do we do this? We do this by an integrated co-teaching model, which we use very successfully in our district. This provides access to our students to the general education curriculum.
So what she's basically saying is they don't want the students who have special needs to leave the district to get their needs met. They have a right to get a free and appropriate education wherever it can be given to them publicly. So that means if the district they're in or the school building that they're in can't deliver it because they don't have the professionals on site to do it, they are duty bound by law to go ahead and get the kids wherever they need to be to get that help because it's funded by the federal government. So what she's saying is, because she's a school board president, we want to keep them in our district. Of course she does, because she wants to keep the money there. I don't mean to, impugn her motives. I'm sure she wants to care for the kids too, but that is also a priority, is we don't want them to, be out in other places because then they're getting the money for their professionals. And she's, talking about this model, this co-teaching model, and it could be great. I have no idea. You'd have to talk to the parents in White Plains about that. But this just shows you how the incentives are to keep the kids in the district or in that school. It's one of the reasons they oppose school choice and letting the money follow the kid, because that kid and their needs represent dollars to the district. And I think we all know that however much we spend per capita or per person, per pupil on the teaching is not actually what it costs to educate them, right? I mean, I hope everybody realizes that.
I've seen it in work, and it works beautifully for our children. In addition, during the pandemic, our students with special needs had in-person, in-school education every day where possible.
That is good. I will give her credit for that. I mean, that's not her personal, but that is an achievement. Most districts in big urban areas did not have that for everybody. So that is good. I hope it was good quality, but for the special needs kids, I mean, you're not going to just sit at a computer. So they were able to provide that. I'll give her kudos.
Again, we thought that this would really hone in and maintain the continuity of their educational experience. Lastly, our Administration for Pupil Services created coffee talks, informal sessions with parents of students with special needs gathered to meet the administration, get to know the administration, exchange ideas. Tell us about your child. Tell us
This is actually a good idea. So this was a good one.
what we can do to make them most successful. This mode of communication, collaboration, and most importantly, trust in what we do for our students with special needs really continues to elevate our children to their individual successes.
And that's great. But so far, you'll notice we've heard a fair amount about students with special needs. And as much as I am very dialed into that and care a lot about that because I have a lot of friends in that community, okay? And part of what I do on this channel is try to elevate their concerns because they usually are the first kids to be left behind. I'm not hearing anything so far about everybody else. So, and remember, a lot of kids are referred to special needs or referred to, special ed who may not really need to be there. They're there because they were not taught to read properly. So you have your kids who are very obvious special needs kids, and then you have a bunch of kids getting referred, and very often it's minority children. So you have a high percentage of, for example, Black children who are referred for special needs when really they just needed proper literacy, proper reading instruction. And by the time they get to third grade or whatever grade it is where somebody finally realizes this isn't going to work, they just refer them to special needs. And their special need is they're illiterate. And that's not what special needs is for. And so then what often happens is, because that's not really what it's for, they don't even get it there because they don't really belong there. And there's a stigma attached to it because they kind of know instinctively, I don't really belong in special needs. I just need reading, but they're not able to articulate that. And so I would really wonder how they're addressing that. And so far, I've just heard special needs in it. And I'm worried that in America, special needs is becoming a catch-all phrase for everybody we couldn't teach or get to be, successful at their grade level that we could possibly get away with shoving in special needs. We're going to, because then it won't look like we're failing. It'll look like they have special needs. If you get what I'm saying. All right, let's see. I don't want to go back too far.
And contributory factors that impact.
Oh, that's this guy. This guy's a Miami-Dade.
We need to stop fooling ourselves as a nation, as educators, as policymakers, particularly in recognizing that opportunity gaps and achievement gaps and unfinished learning actually preceded the pandemic.
Is there anyone fooled by that? He's like, we need to stop fooling ourselves. And I'm like, show me the person who's fooled. Only somebody willfully delusional is fooled about when the learning problem started in America.
There was a crisis in America that preceded the pandemic. Mm-hmm. That crisis, unfortunately, has worsened dramatically for those students who have the most fragile of conditions. Not just the conditions that we observe on stage of the classrooms of America, but the conditions that are usually behind the curtain. So the social emotional issues that children
experience. There it is again.
Face the home insecurity, the food insecurity, the lack of access to health care. All of those are stressors and contributory factors that impact their ability to learn.
You notice how much weight they place on social emotional factors and all these other factors that impact their ability to learn. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you it has no impact. Of course it does. Any stressor in your life impacts your ability to learn. But there's an underlying premise that they never touch on, which is that anyone who doesn't have these factors has no problems learning. There's no issue at all with the person who has enough food on the table and has two parents in the home and all that, they're fine. The implication is that they're fine. Well, they're not fine, especially after this past year. First of all, they can develop anxieties and stresses at school that they don't have at home because it's school, because school is treating them like they're fine when, and forgetting them or just shoving them to the side like, oh, you'll be fine, and putting all their eggs in the basket of the kids who have such obvious needs. And then the way they address those such obvious needs is with all kinds of other dysfunction, like we've seen with these, let's do this racial equity lens teaching with you're an oppressor and you're not, all that kind of stuff, and the Kendyism and the Black Lives Matter. And so what I think is happening is they're creating a whole new set of students who have social emotional problems because of the school that are not only not on their radar, but they're being worsened by all of their emphasis on the home life and the things that are not their business, not their problem for the other kids. They're taking over they're parentifying the other parents and their children and their communities and all of that. And any kid who doesn't fall into that is kind of like, oh, yeah, whatever, go learn. Like they'd have no barriers to learning. And that's just not true. So I just don't think this is what public school is for. Maybe some of you disagree with me. I just don't think I think being aware that you're in a community that has high poverty and that there are kids who have some challenges is important. I think centering everything on it as opposed to academics. Academics are the only things that are going to get these kids out of poverty. Knowing how to read is the only thing that's going to protect them from poverty later. I just feel like if you spend all your time down in the weeds with their trauma and their emotions and everything, you're just going to hobble them further.
And the fact that no community in America that I know at this point guarantees the in front of the curtain and behind the curtain equitable conditions appropriate for learning, there's a lot of work to be done.
You can't do it, though. He's like, no community guarantees the front of the curtain, behind the curtain, and there's a lot of work to be done. It's like, no. The work that needs to be done is on retraining the mindset of parents and communities that the school is not your mommy and not your daddy and not your savior and not the provider of all needs. That's the retraining or the work that needs to be done. You cannot possibly create equity behind the curtain. It's not going to happen. It is utopian to even bring it up.
So I wanted to start by saying that kids in crisis today are at a deeper level of crisis, a darker level of crisis that requires a more articulate, more direct, more individualized approach to each one of them. That's why here in Miami-Dade, we marry the issue of equity with choice. For if you approach a one-size-fits-all theory of action for students, you're going to lose particularly the most fragile. One size fits none. We need to meet children where they are, regardless of their condition, clearly understand what I refer to as front as well as back of the curtain conditions, and address them not only in the classroom, but in collaboration with community organizations, in collaboration with not-for-profit organizations to address the opportunity gaps that so often precede the academic gaps.
Opportunity gaps. Again, they're going outside the school walls and talking about things. And he said, I don't know if you heard it because I have it sped up a little bit. He's got media. He said media. I'm pretty sure he said media. And he's talking about all kinds of things to address these so-called opportunity gaps. And I'm still not hearing at what point the student has any responsibility or the families have any responsibility. I just keep hearing these families talked about like they're infants, like they're helpless infants. They have challenges, to be sure, but this doesn't sound empowering to me. This sounds babying. I don't know. I just feel like they're like, we have all this work to do. Why is it 100% on the school?
Being very specific, because I think the interest of the viewing audience is, so what are the strategies? Look, right now, one of the silver linings of this pandemic is that we have become more data rich than ever before.
That's a little creepy. He's very focused. Miami-Dade is like major on data. They won't shut up about data. And I'm saying like, what is this data that you're collecting? And I mean, I'm not a data geek, so maybe some of you who are can tell me like that this is important and that you can learn so much about your students from looking at data. But I'm so accustomed to them taking data and analyzing it by race and just looking at like, well, all the kids in this racial category and all the kids in this racial category, instead of looking at things like how many kids across the board can read proficiently, how many kids across the board can do math proficiently, how many kids across the board are frequently absent from school, not by race, but everybody. And then if you need to break it down because there are some patterns or anomalies, I can understand that. But this just feels like, again, we're going to read a bunch of numbers and not people, all the while talking about social emotional learning. It just feels like a contradiction to me.
More technologically connected than ever before. But that does not mean that we have translated into well-informed people on the basis of their use of the data. And the fact that you have a lot of data that may or may not necessarily be well used does not necessarily predict that the practice will follow, the best practice will follow. So
thank you for telling us the obvious. And water is wet.
So in Miami-Dade, we've actually taken the time at the beginning of the pandemic of identifying the students in greatest need in developing what we call learning loss indices specific for each student and providing that information to our principals, to our teachers, so they knew who was at greatest risk.
Again, with the focus on everyone at greatest risk. Notice there is no effort made whatsoever to identify the students who are doing okay or who are doing well so they can, because they need support too. Why should you have a high flyer or a tall poppy or whatever you want to call them? Why should that kid's learning loss or opportunity gap for the past year be any less concerning to them? What if they were on a trajectory to end up at Caltech to, take us to the, Mars or something? I don't know, or cure cancer someday. It's like, you're fine. That's how I hear this all the time, is they're always focused on the at most risk, at most risk, at most risk is the people at the bottom. And while I realize we need to get everybody to a level of literacy, that would be, the optimal, but it doesn't feel like there's any focus whatsoever on different kinds of need. There's different ways of knowing, but there's not different kinds of need, only different specific things that people need.
We surveyed parents and students to understand what the critical needs were in terms of technology access, in terms of connectivity, in terms of learning loss, in terms of social emotional support, whatever they needed, in terms of
whatever they need, daddy government will provide.
Food, daily food needs. The next thing we did is we began to anticipate the fact that this tragedy was going to be followed by a significant investment possibility. And
investment possibility.
We began to develop the solution well before federal earmarks were actually appropriated. So we had ready to go strategies specific to, and I'll just give you a couple of examples, intervention materials for tiered interventions, meaning not every child is going to get the same level of intervention or the same type of material. Otherwise, you're just throwing a wide net. We are very strategic in the approach. Additional reading and math coaches, additional mobile devices for students, not just
ka-ching, 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 ka-ching. I mean, all of this, I'm sure, helped. I'm sure all of this was well received. I'm sure all of this actually, could serve a proper purpose, but I'm concerned about the moral hazard of things are bad. Give me things. That doesn't translate to learning. It's really important to understand that you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink. So whether your child learns or not is not a function of whether you gave them a mobile phone or whether you gave them a tablet or whether they had the proper worksheets that were aligned to where they are in the curriculum. It is still an art. It is still a people thing. You still need to have teachers who are good at teaching and are good at conveying material in a way that the kids actually receive it. You still need parents who are willing to support those teachers. And when the kid is not doing their work, do what they need to do to take that mobile phone out of their hands. Do whatever they have to do to make the kid, take it seriously. You have to value the opportunity that's being provided for you after the gap was closed. And based on my personal experience recently, and also in the past, that's not a given. So you can give and give and give and give and spend and spend and spend and spend taxpayer dollars and still end up with people on the other side like this. You've got to present it in a way. And we've seen some of the teachers' little lectures, whatever. And then if you're teaching some of the social justice curriculum where it's like, everybody hates you except me, you're oppressed, except not for me, then what's my motivation to learn?
For the year that we concluded, but for the long haul. Funds for tutorial services, but on demand and at ratios that actually address the needs of the students. And it's not a tutor that changes every time. It's a highly qualified, highly certified, highly dedicated, high-will, high-skilled tutor who actually knows the child, knows the family.
This sounds really expensive, you guys. Oh my goodness gracious.
Expansion of pre-K programs to bring
pre-K. They're all obsessed with pre-K, you guys. Their issue seems to be, as it was with Head Start. They're calling it pre-K now. Once upon a time, it was Head Start. But they seem to be obsessed with the fact that kids are not ready for kindergarten. By not ready, I mean like they've never had a book in their hand and they don't know their ABCs and they can't count to 10. And some of the basic things that, parents might do with their own kids, even kids who go to daycare might have at home with their parents doing this. And so they're saying they're not ready, so they need pre-K. Pre-K is kind of like daycare with counting and ABC singing.
Universality in terms of opportunity versus via access. Expansion of wraparound services for particularly elementary age kids, but all kids. And then let's not forget two last elements. Specialized professional development for our workforce, beginning with our teachers, but everybody, to recognize the academic needs of students, but also recognize the social and emotional.
Oh, there we go again. He's almost like he realized he made a mistake. He put academics first. And he goes, but also. but also the social emotional needs of our students. So far, every single person has said social emotional. They got the memo. Social emotional learning, social emotional needs, barriers, lean in. Are you getting it? Are you like hearing it now? Also, look at this dude's suit. Look at this. It's like a bespoke suit that he's got on. Okay. I'm glad he's doing very well. He's got awards behind him. This is, he strikes me as a politician. I don't know if, I think he's a superintendent or something, but he is, of Miami-Dade, and it's a huge county. So he strikes me as a guy who's really good at memorizing the talking points and presenting the thing and doing the thing and talking about all they do. I would love to know how well this is working on the ground, because it sounds like so many speeches that politicians give about their programs and their policies. And when you really get in there and look at it, it doesn't work quite as well as they describe it. But I don't know that for a fact. I just say it's like one of those sounds too good to be true. And the way he just pivoted from academic needs and social and emotional learning is like, oh, got to get back on talking points.
Emotional needs that kids will return to school in August with. And last, we can do everything right with our teachers, everything right with our kids in the classroom, have the right levels of support. If we do not sensitize the parents and educate the parents on the opportunities that are available and actually increase their skill set, we are missing out on opportunity.
Well, he's not wrong about that, but I don't know that he says we're missing out on opportunity. Like it's their opportunity. It's the kids missing out on opportunity. The parents do need to get on board. But again, I feel like they're making it the school's job, the taxpayer's job, to go out and parent the parents so that the parents can parent. And at some point, we are going to run out of the money to do this. We have to start, weaning people off. And I feel like at exactly the time that we need to be weaning people off dependency, we are encouraging them to be more and more and more dependent on the school and the government as the center of their universe. And part of why I believe people were so freaked out over this last year when they closed the schools is not just that I got to go to work and this is my babysitter, but it's that this is who feeds my child 2 meals a day. This is where I know that my kid is kept, safe while I do who knows what. There's people are having kids and sending them off to the schools to raise their kids. And I think at some point, we as a society have to decide what kind of society we want to be. And when you start hearing things like BLM talking about the nuclear family as this, relic of the old order and we need to get rid of it and so forth. And then I hear them talking about bringing the parents in and teaching the parents and bringing them into the fold kind of thing. I just feel like it's only going to increase. We're just going to continue to have these unparented children who the second they leave the building of the school are wild. They have there's no structure for them at home because they were never encouraged to have it.
And here's the last best practice that I would convey. Look, every kid now in Miami has a device and has connectivity. That portal is a portal for family and parental learning. So
and they're going to use it for that. It sounds like a great idea. I could just picture all these parents that needed you to give the kid a cell phone and needed you to give the kid whatever, laundry and food and everything else. I'm sure they either have the time or the inclination to sit down and go, and now I'm going to take my class on how to be a better parent.
Through our Parent Academy, we are providing support to the parents to create an echo of learning to narrow the existing gaps. They are so pervasive across America.
Are you going to give them a passion for their kid learning? My great-grandparents didn't speak a word of English. And I know this is true of a lot of people's grandparents or great-grandparents. They were poor. They were immigrants. They didn't even have their own bathroom. They had to do a shared bathroom in their building. Never mind electric lights or anything else. I don't understand how they managed to make sure that my grandfather was not only literate, but got a superb education just in public school and made that their top priority, their number one priority in life, how they could do that. And people today are not even expected to try to do that. That's what I don't get. And this is people go, oh, that's bootstraps talking. Okay, well, someone's got to ask. I'll be the person, I'll take the heat, I'll get slammed for it. That's fine. Come at me and tell me why I'm wrong, but I'll listen. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying I don't even hear anybody asking. I feel like it's a given now that the government is going to do this for them.
Thank you so much, Alberto, for making it very concrete, the connecting the vision for today, but also what are the real takeaways and what can we actually do right now to make a difference? And what Rosemary talking about the coffee talks and the co-teaching models, so things are integrated. You're hearing real-time practices. Alberto, the term I think you used was the veil is lifted or the curtain is pulled back. I think I called the veil lifted, but it's pulled back. And what do we find is a path forward and a path forward for our students.
She is so good at saying nothing. She's trying to like recap what he just said, and she's pulling talking points and this is so great. And then you said this and you said that. I'm like, and you added nothing. Shut up.
Understanding what they need and giving it to them in the way that they need it and when they need it.
I was here. I heard him.
So really very practical strategies, hearing straight from superintendent down in Miami-Dade. Thank you.
You literally added nothing.
There's really practical strategies. Let me move to another question about what it's going to look like when we see our students. We're looking forward to seeing our students returning to campuses in.
Are you? Because we've heard that out west that most of the teachers don't want to go back, and there's even talk of a kind of a strike where they're not going to go back to full-time learning in the classroom. We're hearing rumors about this all over the country that teachers are like, well, I don't really want to go back full-time, and maybe we just won't go, and maybe it'll be a strike, and maybe we're going to hold out for more of this and that and the other. You're so looking forward to your students coming back in the fall. I'll believe it when I see it.
Person, and we're all looking forward to getting back to some semblance of what feels like normalcy after so much isolation and loss. If we ever talk about the pandemic and don't recognize true losses that have happened, we're forgetting part of some things that families and communities have been through.
Yeah, we have. And you know who's mostly to blame? Teachers unions.
But as we think about what we're all looking forward to, I want to ask Principal Kafele and Rosemary, I want to ask, how do you think that we can harness the momentum and the urgency that we all are experiencing in this moment?
Before he talks, because I can't remember who talks first, but I think this Principal Kafele speaks. This guy is a very, he's a multiple award-winning principal. He's written many books, very well-spoken man. I have trouble listening to him because I can't tell if like the way he talks, there are things where like, okay, I could agree with that if I understood what you meant, if I was sure we were on the same page. And then I went and looked him up, and I find out that he is a big equity guy. He's a big equity guy. He's also a big one for, differentiating and saying that there's a difference between white teachers and black teachers. And he may be right. I don't know. I haven't read his books, but he's definitely very race conscious and definitely looks at equity and racial justice through that kind of a lens. Whether he does it as far as America's inherently racist or not, I cannot say. I couldn't figure that out from his website or necessarily from listening to him here. But I wanted to preface it with a little intro on the guy. But he is highly respected principal who apparently has done great things in his district.
Do we harness that urgency momentum so that we can better understand the needs of our students and specifically their social emotional needs, and for those that have lost the most instructional time?
Yeah, his name does sound like Kofefe. It's like it's Kofele.
Might look and feel kind of normal in some communities, but we know that there are losses there. What are the ways that we can go about harnessing the momentum now? And you could go in whichever order you want.
All right, let me jump in here. Let me first say I'm honored as well to be on this panel. I thank you immensely for the opportunity. Listening to the question, the operative word for me, the word that really jumps out is the word normalcy. And for me, and probably for everybody on this panel and everybody in education, normalcy is not a place I want to go back to.
Now, when I heard him say this, my initial thought was, dude, I so agree with you, because the state of the state with education was so bad that if you're calling that normal, I don't want to go back there. And he seems to be going in that direction. I just don't know what his worldview is on the how to fix it part. That's the part I struggled with.
Because we've all been fighting to transform schools, to change schools, to change opportunities and possibilities for young people. And normal, I think about why I came into education in the first place. And I came in because I wanted to be a change agent. There's a lot of it. There's a lot of things that need to be changed. You think about the theme of this conference. I'm
just noticing your comment, Patrice. Okay, thank you for that. All right, so she says, I think we have to be careful not to look at it that way. I don't know what I didn't read. Can I make it louder? That is a good question. I don't know if I can make it louder. Maybe. I don't know if that's going to work for you. so you were hungry and we have a responsibility to give them healthy food. This is a challenge. I mean, obviously I don't want any child to go hungry and to go to school hungry. I think my concern is that I feel like it needs to be balanced with, making sure that when there are supports for kids, because parents can't do it, that you're supporting the parents in such a way that the parents can ultimately support themselves. So rather than just give the kid the food, find out what's going on. And then if the parent needs like more education, if the parent needs, let's say, they need a lawyer, like maybe there's a problem, they need legal help. Maybe they need, figure out what can you do substantively to help the parent be able to parent. That's kind of what I'm not really hearing. Now, maybe it's in there what they're talking about with bringing parents to the table, but I heard a lot of parents come and go, we need this, we need this, we need this. Okay, we give it to you. And if it's going to help a kid, learn, like you need to be fed and you need to get to school, I'm all for that. I just want to make sure that what's going back towards the parents is how can we get you to a place where you can do this for them? Because that is technically what the parents should do. And in so doing, not only are we giving them real help, but that will like pay off down the road for not only for them, but for their children too. Their children want to see them surviving and thriving, but also it sends a message to the broader community that you do need to step up. You need to do this. Parenting is hard. Parenting is expensive because for every person who literally just falls on hard times and it's totally not their fault, there are a bunch that make some really poor choices around their kids or make really poor choices and then have kids and then have more kids. And at some point, there has to be a line where you say, you kind of send a message back to society saying, to community saying, we're only in this together to a point. You have to step up because we can't, there are people out there slogging away, working class families, busting their butt to feed their kids. And they have it hard too. You're just not hearing from them because they're doing it. So we got to make sure we don't just give everybody, there's like a little bit of a moral hazard, just give and give and give and give. I want to know what's going back to help parents help themselves.
And the inequities that exist. We think about the very basic definition of what equity is, meeting young people where they are, as they are. There's a whole lot of young people who walk into schools every day as they are, and their needs are not being met. So what we have to do moving forward, we got to assess, well, what is it about normal that we don't want to bring into moving forward? What is about that? And then as we move forward, what are the things that we need to change? And particularly, again, just stay consistent with the theme as it relates to equity. What is it that we can do that we meet the needs of every youngster that walks into that building, but looking at it through the lens of an administrator? What is it that we do that we support and meet the needs of every staff person?
So, first of all, can you guys hear it better? Can you hear it better? Just want to make sure. Yeah, I mean, again, with the give them their needs and meet their needs and meet their needs. I guess I hear this so much, and I hear them always asking for more money, and I'm not seeing results in terms of academics. So, and I'm not hearing anything here about how they're going to address that. So when they start building equitable learning environments in our schools, I know that the summit is about the environment. So they're talking about making sure that the kids, have a school that supports learning. But to me, an equitable learning environment does include academics. It includes, making sure that the kids are getting taught what they need to be taught so that they can actually learn. If you really want them to succeed, it's about more than food and bus rides and laundry and all that stuff. Their definition of equity is very narrow. And their definition of learning, they say learning environment. This sounds like just living. This sounds like, we're building an environment where the kids are fed and clothed and physically safe. And we're focusing on their emotional stability and all the stuff. But I'm not really hearing anything about learning.
In that building as well, in that district as well, every teacher. So I want to do an analysis of what was before versus what it is that we can do now. That's
been done, by the way. So every time you hear a teacher say, I want to do an analysis and I want to do an analysis of what we've been doing, there are nonprofit groups all over trying to get change into schools that have been doing this analysis on their own, trying to persuade think tanks, trying to persuade these people to change what they're doing for years. So analysis is being done, has been done, and has been brought to them time and time again. If they didn't fund it and they didn't design it and they didn't, orchestrate it, they don't seem to want it. So again, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but when you say, I want to do an analysis, I'm like, what more do you want people to tell you? You're not teaching people to read. You're not making sure that communities are supported in a way that will lead to self-sufficiency. You're not emphasizing that at all. You're not teaching kids that there's meaning inherent in doing well in school and showing up prepared mentally to learn. If you're focusing on social emotional factors so much, are you including in the social emotional attitude adjustment about learning itself? Or is it you get to wait until everything is perfect for you, and then we'll ask you to learn. Then we'll ask you to bring it. This kind of analysis has been done, and it's so disingenuous to act like, oh, we have no idea what's been failing.
And I also want to look at the opportunities that the pandemic has presented. And one of the things that stands out for me in terms of opportunities that were presented are these platforms, these virtual platforms.
That everyone hates. No, literally, like everyone has been saying for a year, we don't want to do online school. This to me is another one of those where the teachers have been whispering in each other's ears going, how can we stay home more? How can we make this, like, he calls it an opportunity, but it's not an opportunity for the students. I think they want it to be another opportunity for teachers to work from home ongoing and, say to all the kids like, hey, if you want to, continue to learn at home. And it's interesting because there's a cohort of teachers who want that, who are like, yeah, I kind of like working in my pajamas. And then there are those who have been put on the spot because now the classroom is in the home. Parents are seeing what they're teaching and they don't like it. And they're saying, nope, if you want your kid to do virtual learning, they're going to have to do the separate virtual school the district offers, because they already have virtual learning. They already have programs for kids who have various disabilities and can't physically come to school. That's been going on for years and years and years. I had a friend whose daughter went through that for high school, and she's way before the pandemic, she went to high school at home. But he sounds like he wants to add to that. He wants to expand that, make it bigger and make it, more of an opportunity for more students, when most of the students have been saying, we don't want this.
Because this is not going anywhere, and it doesn't need to go anywhere.
Oh, but it does.
Because just the short answer, so I can yield to Rosemary, I think about the access that a school has to parents that we may not have had in the past in terms of just getting parents to come out.
They don't. I'm so sorry, they don't. I made a video about this experience with my recent teaching experience, and I don't believe it's unique. I really don't, because I've talked to a bunch of other teachers who I trust and respect, who have told me that this is par for the course, that for this entire year, when they had opportunities to come to Zoom meetings, when they had opportunities to come to various things to talk about their kids' learning, they simply did not show up. And there were all kinds of excuses. I work a shift that time. I can't be there then. I can't, I can't, whatever. I can't. 20 families, fewer than 10 showed up to a mandatory orientation that was at 7:00 at night. And we couldn't get all of them to show up.
Now I wouldn't need them to come out. I just need them to have access to the internet. It could just be the phone.
You have to get them to show up to that. They still don't do that. They have this like Pollyanna vision of what you can make happen. And instead of saying, we're going to create opportunities, and if you don't show up, we're moving on. We're moving on without you. And we'll try to reach out to your kid, because your kid doesn't deserve to suffer from your whatever it is. But we're going to keep going for the kids who are here and the families who show up and everybody who is here to learn. Every time I look at public education, they seem to be finding new and better ways to reach out to the people who don't want to learn, don't want to be there, don't want to have anything to do with it. And why not create an opportunity for them to not do it? I'm dead serious. Tell people who consistently don't show up for all of this that you're going to create some kind of alternative school, alternative opportunity, so that they are not in the space occupying all kinds of time and money and energy, whatever, taking it away from the people who want to be there.
Now I could literally have whole school, meaning parents, meetings literally every week, every Monday night, the state of the school message, and then dialogue with the parents, and then break out into breakout groups and have smaller sessions with them. We can do things that we could never have done before as it relates.
Apparently parents have tons and tons of time to interact with you.
It's just parent relations. So there's a lot to say there, but I'm gonna yield to Rosemary.
I don't know, guys. What do you think? Am I all wet here? Am I all wet that, parents are like, I mean, even with when we were home and stuck at home, people were not wanting to sit and talk to this is so much in your face. As a parent, and I don't think I'm that unique. I want my kids to have from school. I want my kids to learn things and stuff. I don't want the school in my life. I really don't. I don't want the school to know my personal problems. I don't want the school to know my child's personal problems unless it's literally relevant to their everyday experience. I would wait to share stuff like that with them until the absolute last moment. I don't really want them in my life. They are government. Let's not forget that all these smiling faces, we can reach out and we can help and we can do this with, they're government. They're not warm and fuzzy. They have the power they have police power. If you give so much information about your home life and they decide that your home life is not sufficient for your child, they can call social services and your child is out of your home. So, they are the mandatory reporting on things how long is it going to be, do you think, before a kid comes into school and says, Mom told me that this stuff isn't right about what, Mr. Kendi said in this book. And, mom's a single mom or mom doesn't have a lot of money or whatever. How long is it going to be before they find some reason to pull that kid out of that house because they don't like your opinions? They don't like your ideas. This is reaching too far in to people's lives, and it's costing money. So what he wants to do is build even a more elaborate network of things and then have him sit there and, get paid, because I'm sure he's a union employee, overtime to sit there at night on these, summits and whatnot. It's too much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for this question, first of all. And when I look at this question and I think about it, I think about the urgency of the moment and social emotional needs.
Oh my God. Social emotional needs. Equitable learning environment apparently is all about emotions.
It all starts with positive and trusting relationships and a commitment to each child.
A commitment to each child. Do you think that's possible?
No, in my plans that we have to support social emotional.
This is obviously going into trainings. I've seen this. Unions, first of all, and school board associations are running webinars like constantly for their members on social emotional learning. Culturally competent, culturally literate education, Black Lives Matter in the classroom, racial equity in the classroom, how to set up a racially, racial social justice in your classroom, blah, blah, blah. These webinars are constantly going in every single state. I don't care if you're in the reddest state known to man and if you have a ban on critical race theory. These webinars, seminars, continued learning things are going on. And what I've noticed about educators and people in education is they can't wait to use their buzzwords. They can't wait to go from their little webinar and go to the next opportunity to tell you what they learned in their webinar. And that's what I'm sensing has happened here is they've all gone to some kind of training and it's all about social emotional learning.
Trauma before we can get to academic success. It's something that we have to address. There will be lingering trauma from this time. What can we do? What are we doing? As an example, we have instituted school mental health clinics.
School mental health clinics. Do you want the government supplying your child with a therapist? Do you want the government school putting a licensed clinician right? It's right here in the thing, right in the school, a licensed clinician right in the school to talk to your child when you're not there behind your back about who knows what.
And we can seek the assistance of a licensed clinician right in the school. And when I think about that,
that's why I'm showing the text.
Clinician in the school, a service that many of our students may need, when they need it, where they need it. When I think of what you said, Deputy Secretary, that is where that clinic hits me.
Just so you know, they're also putting clinics nearby or giving kids rides to clinics for gender, to get to testosterone. They're taking them over to Planned Parenthood. They're doing a fair amount of clinical, medical, and psychological stuff already. And they have been since before the pandemic. This is not new. So now they're saying they're going to address the trauma they suffered as a function of the pandemic. I have to wonder how much they're going to reach, because we know that this junk has infected therapy. So how much are they going to use the therapy that the kids supposedly need so desperately to influence their thought process as well? So we're going to have them in the classroom. We're going to have a clinician and a psychologist. We're going to be giving them food. After a while, it's hard not to see this as a cult. It's hard not to see this as this kind of weird little commune, and the kids go home to sleep.
Our students need, where they need it, available, accessible when they need it. Let me also add that in White Plains, our teachers during the pandemic, our educators reached out.
Sorry, I was down here reading the text for some reason and I forgot to roll it back up. So,
and touched base with our students. The question, are you okay? How can I help? What do you need? It is that type of relationship that paves the way for schools to reopen and for children to come back knowing that the caring professionals that they left are still there.
All right. Do you guys remember being in school? Like when I was in elementary school, I might have liked this, for my teacher to just be like, how are you? Whatever. I think once I got to middle school, if my teachers had talked to me that way or they had gotten in my business, I would have been like, I'm sorry, what? Like, I would not have wanted that. But that's me. Is this like a new way that kids are, that at any age they want these people who aren't their parents and aren't their relatives that, maybe they see them every day, but they don't really know them. They're what I used to tell my kids are a kind of know. They're not like somebody you know. Do you really want them coming? Are you okay? Are you okay? It feels creepy. It's kind of it's total Scientology. It's what cult grooming people do. They either come at you with are you okay? You seem like you need to talk to someone. So they get inside your head and find out personal details they can then leverage some other way. But they come back at you with the love bombing. It's like, you're doing so awesome. I'm so excited to see you. You're the best ever. I missed you so much. Oh my gosh. I'm tears. That's what they do. It's a kind of a grooming. I actually preferred and had more respect for and learned better from the teachers who kept their appropriate distance, who kept it pretty much all business. And when they came to me, it was about my academics. It was about the thing that I knew I was there to do. And I was not always a good student, guys. I wasn't really a great student till high school, like sophomore year on. Up to the point I was a fair to middling student. I was kind of a class clown, passed notes a lot. I was very small. I was the youngest in my class, and I didn't quite know how to adjust to the environment. I'd gone to Montessori preschool and had thrived there. And then when I went into the public school, I was floundering. So I figured out pretty quickly, if I just become this little clowny person, then I can make friends. And I wasn't learning anything. And I could already read better than everybody in the school anyway. I just didn't do my homework. But when I had teachers come at me with the stern, you're better than this. I know you are, and I'm not going to tolerate this from you. And one teacher even made me sit at the front of the room facing the rest of the class, which was humiliating, but God bless her. She's like my favorite teacher ever, because she showed me what it means to actually achieve and to be treated with tough love. I'm not tolerating this behavior from you. It's just completely ridiculous. She didn't come up with are you okay? Is something wrong at home? And there was lots wrong at home. Oh my God, so much wrong at home that I'm so glad nobody ever asked me about, because then they would have known too, and it would be awkward.
And they know that because these caring professionals reached out to them during the toughest time of the pandemic. It is so critical to address those social and emotional needs, and making a clinic so accessible is one mighty way that we are doing our hardest work. Thank you.
And again, I just question the premise. They say this like it's a fact, and they said this would be evidence-based practices. I'm not seeing the evidence. I'm not seeing that before we reached out, there were kids who were doing this poorly. And then after we did this program, or after we talked to them and we had put them through this counseling, they were doing so much better. Other than that, it's just a theory. It's a theory that I think resonates with people. Go, that sounds about right. Yeah, but to really stop and think about it. And it's creepy. But nobody does that. Nobody asks those questions and says, do we really want to be doing this?
I don't know if I have a favorite question.
I'm so sorry I didn't roll this down.
The bar here, and each of these answers just get more.
But I don't want to look at her face.
Really
so
the specificity and the examples, and the Principal Kafele, thank you for what you talked about around bringing parents. And I remember as a principal, I put my principal hat back on, and what it was like when I started at Family Friday, and 1 or 2 families would come, and by 2 years in,
1 or 2 families for 2 years, and she kept doing it. Again, I apologize if this is this way. I think what happened was I had this on and I was listening to it, but I started doing some work on my other monitor and I forgot.
We would have 200 or 300 families. And now what you just cast a vision for, it was a school with 1,000 kids, and 200 or 300 families would come. there's opportunity here about bringing more families together in those ways. And Rosemary, you added something new to I always say equity is each and every student gets what they need, when they need it, in the way that they need it.
We heard you.
And where they need it. And as a principal who built a school-based health center, I know what it means to bring services.
Why am I not surprised that she built a school-based health center? Why am I not surprised?
Right onto the campuses to support students. Let me move to Olivia and Alberto. Another question for both of you. Before the pandemic, I keep going before and now, and what's next, LGBTQ students, especially LGBTQ students, youth of color, and those with disabilities made up a majority of the runaway and homeless youth due to peer harassment. I know we know about this. Lack of school support and affirmation, isolation, or even intolerance in their own homes. And those factors were exacerbated greatly during the pandemic.
How? Okay. If they were runaways mostly due to in-school harassment, and then they weren't at school, how was it exacerbated during the pandemic? I mean, if the harassment was at home, that makes sense, but then it wasn't because of the school. If it was at school, then they weren't at school. So this is a very confusing thing to me that she's saying. And it just goes hand in hand with what I already believe is going on, which is they're taking a problem that is a real problem. Okay. The kids get bullied, and they often get bullied because of some of these, LGBTQ issues. And they're magnifying. They want us to see this problem as really, really big, because then money and staff, right? Money and programs. It's another avenue to get this kind of critical social justice into the school under the guise of we're helping these kids not be runaways. And obviously I don't want anyone to run away, and I don't want anyone to be bullied. But I also don't think it's this massive problem. I mean, how many people are we talking about? What percentage of the population do these kids make up? And maybe that's something we need to talk about as well, because we know that the number of kids who now identify as trans, especially girls, female to male, has exploded like 300% or some crazy amount. So why is that? Like, I think we need to look at that, because all of this identity marker stuff may be actually creating some of this problem. Because imagine that's going on, and then you go home and you tell your parent, oh, this is who I am now. And the parent doesn't believe it, because the parent sees it as not being an organic situation, because they feel like it's been influenced by the school. I know some situations where that's happened. And so they keep referring to the child by their so-called dead name. And then the kid runs away, because kids sometimes run away for dumb reasons. They don't always run away for a legitimate reason. The way that she's talking is like anybody who ran away because they were bullied and beat up on, and those bad people. There are some kids who run away because they run away. And then, some, but and I think that is more likely if you put it into their head that this is who they are, and they go home and their parents trying to help them and say, this, come on, let's talk about this. Let me take you to a separate counselor. You just don't understand me. And then they run away. How do we even know? We don't know. We just know that this is a possibility. And I have read enough disturbing things about this trend to think that she's framing this in a way that makes the school out again to be the savior and the only safe place in the world for these kids.
And so now, here we are, 2021, it's already a record-breaking year for anti-trans bills introduced in state legislatures.
And she's so giddy about that, not recognizing how many people are being hurt by these bills, namely girls in sports and just everybody in general, when we're talking about everybody who wants to use any bathroom can, no matter what.
And some have even become laws. And the Biden administration and the department are committed to ending discrimination of LGBTQ youth. What can schools do to ensure our LGBTQ youth feel included, and not just included, but welcome in their school environments and their communities?
Well, look, I can't believe that we're in 20.
So I can't see him, and now it's starting to bother me. He's talking about, Miami Dade, whatever. We've been running like an hour and a half. I can keep going, you guys, but we probably have gotten the gist of where this goes, with each person just reiterating what the other person said. Let's see if at any point I remembered to scroll down. Okay. So now we're getting to pandemic stuff. Mostly, okay. So they were talking about replacing the schools. Now they're talking about changing the schools. All right. Here we go. There's a rise in homeschooling. He's very concerned. Hold on.
How they've responded. A school in DC, they said our kids need access to the laundry so they can come to school with clean, fresh, clean clothes. And this kind of out of the box thinking is what allows us to go from measuring the problem to solving the problem. One of the things we haven't done, we've been focused on closing the achievement gap for a long time in this country, but the gaps have remained. But what we haven't done is learn from the places that have made the most progress.
I mean, that is a good point. They haven't. But what he's not talking about is the ones that have made the most progress are charter schools and homeschool. Kids are pulled out to homeschool. Instead of looking at homeschool as an opportunity to learn, why do kids do so much better in homeschool? Why isn't anyone asking that question? It seems like a logical question, okay? They keep saying it's so essential for their social emotional learning. And everybody tells you if you have your kid at home, they're not going to get socialized. And yet, one of the places where kids make the most strides in terms of improvement is by getting pulled out and being homeschooled. But that's not going to be the case.
That's what we've been hearing today. Districts and schools that have come up with strategies that have worked. And so that's why I want to repeat what Principal Covelli said. Our goal should not be to return to what wasn't working. Our goal should be to create schools that are more responsive to the needs of kids and families. And we should all be concerned because there is a rise in homeschooling.
We should be concerned that there's a rise in homeschooling. So now you hear it. They saying the quiet part out loud. We have to maintain our monopoly. And so he just got done saying, let's look at where it's worked. Let's look at where kids have done well. But we got to be concerned about these people homeschooling. No, if they had any intelligence at all, they would go to the homeschoolers and say, why did you pull your kids out? What's working better? What can we learn from you? What would it take to win you back? Okay. No, instead it's like, we need to maintain our monopoly. We need to be concerned.
I want parents who say, maybe school doesn't work for my child, because how often do children come home and say, wow, what a day. That was inspiring. Well, that should happen sometimes.
Sometimes? How about a lot? That should happen sometimes.
That's what education should do. It should empower, it should challenge. And so it's very important that when equity is mentioned, it not be interpreted as mediocrity and not be interpreted as that's just for some kids. It's for all kids.
And I want to stress that we've known since the 60s, because of Marva Collins, what it takes to inspire kids, even kids in the inner city, because she was in inner city Chicago. And even kids who come from poverty, even kids who don't have a dad in the home. We've known for a long time what kind of learning inspires kids, what kind of learning gets them excited, how early you have to start with it, what not to do, some of the things that really turn kids off. We've known that this is not a mystery. This is why homeschool kids have that experience. This is why they are often more well-adjusted, polite, into reading, more inspired by their learning. It's not because it's unknown. We know how to do it. What they don't know how to do is they don't know how to teach that way. Because to teach that way, you have to be at a level of intelligence and creativity and self-reflection and value critical thinking. You have to be willing to have students in your class who are going to challenge you and challenge the system that you need to maintain your job. They're so afraid of losing their monopoly and losing their stranglehold on the systems that they work in, that they don't actually want to do the things you would do because we know how to do it. They're desperately trying to find the thing that will do all that and let them keep their jobs and let them keep this system the way it is and let them have unions and let them keep, demanding more money every year. They want it all, and you cannot have it all. You just can't. The method is the madness. The system is the sickness. And they don't want to admit it. They're just like that they're in an abusive relationship with their own system. No, this will be the thing that'll fix the marriage. This will do it. This will do it. No, get a divorce.
All kids need to be challenged. All kids need to be pushed. All kids need to be inspired. And those should be our goals for the reopening of schools. So
they're not going to happen in the schools as they're currently structured. I'm sorry to say. You can't. That should be your goal, but it can't be because the system's the problem.
The Biden administration's done its part by making sure the resources are there. Now we have to do the work to make sure the resources are applied effectively and creatively to meet the needs of our children.
Then you're going to need completely different teachers. You would literally need to fire about 85 to 90% of your workforce and start over because they've not been trained to do that. Everything that he says he wants is not possible with the teaching force he's got.
If we can do that, then we will come out of this period, this very challenging period, better than we were. And
that's a pipe dream.
That should be our goal.
Couldn't agree more as we build back better. And what Principal Covelli said, we're not.
I hate that expression. I'm not going to make it the full 4 years listening to Build Back Better.
It's not returning to normalcy. And we heard our secretary say, this is our moment. We have the resources we need, and we're not going to admire the problem, or as Pedro just said, measure the problem. We don't need to measure it. We don't need to admire it. It's time for action. The support.
She's contradicting this dude who said, I want to do a study. No, we don't need to measure it. We know the problem. If you knew the problem, you would not be speaking right now, because the problem is you.
Support is there, the resources that are there, the knowledge is in the field, and you lean in student by student, community by community, and peel back that curtain, and look where we'll be able to go.
She's just repeating shit they said. Peel back curtains, lean in, stuff, words.
Return to normalcy, right, Principal Kafele? Let me give one more question here, and then we'll do a lightning round. The pandemic, I'm going to ask Alejandro and Alberto about this, how the pandemic has laid bare this long-standing disparity in physically healthy and safe school buildings. We have crumbling and outdated schools that are primarily located, unfortunately, in communities of concentrated poverty. There was a 2020 report by the Government Accountability Office that found that 1 in 4 school districts need to replace or update major systems in most of their schools.
And do you know how much money is sitting in the COVID relief fund? $67 billion, most of which has not been spent. These school districts have the money. This isn't about not having the money. This is about not having the will or whatever else is going on, or just wanting to keep a problem alive so they can keep complaining about it endlessly. This has been a problem. They have raised this issue. Let's see. I lived in Chicago in the mid-90s, and they were complaining about this problem then. To my knowledge, they haven't fixed it.
That means HVAC, plumbing, roofing, electricity, and the American Jobs Plan proposes $100 billion investment.
Another $100 billion.
To modernize schools.
And reach into your states where it's supposed to be the states doing it. So that means the states are going to have to apply for this money, and then they're going to give the contracts to their political friends and allies and
that need the most help in this area. How will updated school buildings and classrooms in particular advance racial and socioeconomic justice?
I'm dying to hear this one. Because certainly that's the problem. The problem is the kids can't learn because the building HVAC hasn't been updated. There are kids going to school in buildings with no floor in parts of Africa, and they are, doing calculus in 10th grade. But, definitely let's rebuild the buildings.
Thank you for that. That's an excellent question. So, my students at Aton Elementary have seen the differences between our school and more affluent schools across town. They've seen things like other schools having turf fields and, schools without bars on the.
And let me guess. You guys are right there to tell them that matters. You're right there to tell them that fancy, nice building on the other side of town is the difference between them knowing how to read and not knowing how to read, right? Or are you there to say, guys, that's a building. This is about you and the material and your commitment to learning it and my commitment to teaching it to you and making sure you have what you need to learn it. It's not about the fancy building. I'm not saying don't make a nicer building if the money's there. I'm just saying it has nothing to do with racism or racial justice. It has nothing to do with it. It's not a difference of whether you can learn. Back in the day when the schools in Baltimore barely had heat at all, when Thurgood Marshall was in school, how did he become a Supreme Court justice? I guarantee you his segregated school did not have fancy equipment like the school across the town. Okay? It didn't even have as nice a school as the poor white school on the other side of town. And yet their scores were better than that white school when they were segregated. This is the biggest myth in education, is that somehow a nicer, fancier building is going to make the difference. They say that when they bus them 45 minutes to get them to a nicer, fancier building, and then they still don't do well. They say when they want to rebuild buildings, and then they do rebuild buildings, and it still doesn't move the needle one bit. If the teachers and the administrators convey to the parents and the students that this matters, what do you think? They're going to lean into it, aren't they? They're going to lean into the narrative that I'm not doing well in school because my building has bars on the windows.
And that have working water fountains, and they wonder and they ask, why we don't have these things. And, that leaves me with having.
Maybe it's because the Democrats who run that part of town or that city have misspent money, and the people who run the school board and so forth and so on, because for decades, this has been brought up as a problem, and this could have been solved Baltimore is a classic example. These problems could have been solved if people wanted to solve them, as opposed to keep them alive in perpetuity to have something to whine and complain about. This would not be the problem. But instead of telling them that it's the elected officials who have misspent funds and done things wrong for decades, it's those white people's fault on the other side of town.
The difficult conversation and sharing with them that, because where we live, that translates to some of the resources that we're provided.
We're provided. You guys elect these people. You elect. There's not like a magic resource fairy that comes along and goes, for you because you're this race, and for you because you're this race, and now you have racial injustice because I was just unjust to you. I, the resource fairy. That's not how it works. You guys elect your politicians. You chose badly.
So just providing them with adequate learning spaces and learning environments helps them see that they are just as valued as any other student from across.
Why are you attaching the value of the child to this? The children across town are valued. Actually, they're probably not valued any more than these kids, because the politicians don't think about the kids. They think about the parents who are voting for them and what their priorities are and whether they're going to be held accountable or not, or whether they're going to be voted back into office because they have the right last name and the right skin color, or they say the right things and promise the right things, or validate their resentment enough, and they get voted back into office. They're not holding anyone accountable because they don't know how to hold anyone accountable, because they're also illiterate, because they also went to your schools.
So it is so critical. Our students see it, our families see it, and I think the time is now to make some change.
You're telling them they're not valued. Well, you're right, but it was a long time ago, and it wasn't by the people across town. It's by the people right there. And when you pass on that message to them that they have no say in this, they're just in it. They're just victims. It's not how they voted. It's not whether they show up to school board meetings. It's not whether they show up to town hall meetings and hold their elected leaders accountable and run them out of office if they don't deliver. It's about those people on the other side of town. Every time you repeat that narrative, you're responsible.
Yeah, I will add to what Alejandro so eloquently mentioned.
So eloquently blathered on about.
This is the right investment at the right time frame.
Investment. It's not investment. Because you know why? First of all, it's not your money. You're spending. Second of all, it's not a one-to-one of like, I'm taking the dollar and putting it into the kid. It's a very roundabout way, and investments have returns. Where are the returns? We have been investing and investing and investing, your term, for decades. And here's the returns. Going down, 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 and it's diminishing. And yet the investment cost is going up, 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 up. No investor in their right mind would put another nickel into the public schools. That's not investment. It's spending. You're spending into a bottomless pit. It's a clunker, and you keep replacing parts on your clunker. That's what you're doing. And by this point, you've bought a Rolls Royce, but you're still driving a clunker.
Absolutely the right reason. I mean, if you believe in the principles of justice that define our country.
Nope, our country is not defined by principles of justice. Our country is defined by principles of liberty. This is a narrative that I absolutely hate, and it comes up in education all the time. Justice, justice, justice. Again, implication, this is unjust. If it's unjust, you made it that way because you guys control these schools. We parents don't. We have long been cut out of this little arrangement that you've got going on with one party in government primarily, and we're way out there in the hinterland of influence, okay? Justice would be pulling a real chair up to the table, handing us a check and saying, pick your school. And we want to earn your business. That would be justice, because for so long, the injustice has been taking our money and giving nothing back for it. So the principle is liberty, sir. And we have been compelled to attend these schools, to pay for these schools, to pay more for these schools, and to listen to you lie for decades.
Then environmental justice must be a consideration.
Environmental justice.
Not just the physical facility, the building itself, the quality of the air conditioned units.
I can't listen to this anymore. I'm sorry, you guys. It's really kind of boring after a point. All right. And then this goes on, blah, blah. There's nothing more here that's of use to you. I just want to play, okay, the final thing that she says, and then the little video, which some of you have already seen if you're in my locals, and then a few more comments by some other people right after that, and then we'll be done.
An agency. I'm thrilled to introduce two extremely special students that you're going to get to meet, Miles Stokes and Willie Ochoa. They attend Capital City High School here in Washington, D.C., and you're going to get the great honor and privilege of hearing their spoken word piece. It's called No One Standing Alone. Oh, this piece perfectly captures the spirit of today's summit.
If this piece perfectly captures the spirit of today's summit, we're in even deeper trouble than I thought. If you haven't seen it already, I mean, I can't translate this one for you.
So happy that you're going to get to hear their voice. You will hear from them and you will understand what they say, that equity is a verb and together we are powerful.
Oh, I really won't understand anything from this. I promise you. Part of School Talk's 12th annual Voices of Change program. Voices of Change uses art to equip youth, blah, blah.
Hey, Willie.
Hey, Miles, what's on your mind?
In this land of the free, who can we trust? Searching for the truth, but blindsided by lies. We're struck. Support is key. Unlocking infinite potential of school programs that benefit a select few are cruel. Striving for excellence, that motto is mandatory to raise us to a higher glory. Feels like a rush to the finish line. Deadlines coming fast. More intent and attention to our needs in the past.
True, but now we're securing our legacy in the fabric of Black lives. Because of our contribution, everyone survived. Protesting to relieve stress, visions of being our best, the hands of time we manage with firm grips to handle it. Craving social interactions and excess constant distraction. Be focused, be strong, be vigilant. It won't be long.
Trouble arises, but lessons learned make us mature.
Focusing on the positive and ways we could be more.
Uplifting each other and showing support.
Procrastination, hate, and racism, we abort.
We work hard so we can succeed and become our dream. No one's staying alone.
No one's standing alone.
We
must
work
as
a
team.
Why must we? No, I want to know. Why is it bad for me to just go to school and achieve and go on and live my life? And why must I work as a team? I don't understand. And since when is protesting to relieve stress? Is that what we do now? We go out in the street and we scream and yell and, carry on and block traffic to relieve stress. So causing other people stress is how we relieve stress. I think the social emotional learning piece needs to be revisited, because that's emotional dysregulation. If you need to protest to relieve stress, it's not how it's done. Okay. Do you guys understand any of this? Is this I'm so confused. It is so confusing and weird. And did you see her? You'll understand. This perfectly captures the spirit of this summit. It's just so amazing. And I was waiting for greatness and I saw this, I went, oh my God, it's way worse than I thought. All right. So now we're going to hear from, let's see if I can find, okay, these people are something else. Not her. She's word salady.
Is critical to intervention efforts and is most impactful when schools are staffed with the recommended number of school psychologists, counselors, and social workers. Adequate staffing and early intervention are key to increasing equity in schools.
So she's all about, we got to have more staff of social workers, whatever, to increase equity in schools. And then these are the two people. Who are they? Let me finish up with her. The next two people you're going to hear, I was just astounded at their expectations.
Are key to increasing equity in schools.
Yeah, blah, blah.
When I think about my own identity as a Filipino American, an immigrant, and an English learner, I have to say that equity means not using the same one-size-fits-all approach for our diverse student population. Equity means having highly trained teachers who use culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy to ensure that regardless of our students' racial, ethnic, and cultural backgrounds, and despite their limited language abilities or specific learning disabilities, every student can achieve academic success.
But every student isn't. And the more we focus on all the things that make them different, the less well they're doing. Like, that's been documented. So did you hear her whole speech? It was like right out of the can, you know, like, where's the, okay, here's the, oh, there it is. All right, good, here. It's the same words strung together. My identity as a Filipino American, and I have that, blah, 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 blah. I know nothing about you now, except that you're what your declared identity is. And she's saying we need highly trained teachers. Do you think a teacher can be so highly trained that they understand every last little ethnicity they could walk into the classroom? And at what point are these students reminded that they're Americans? And at what point do we tell them that they don't need to see themselves in the literal sense in the material to learn the material? That you can learn math without having the word problems be about your political views or your nationality. You don't need to see a picture of somebody in a book that looks exactly like you. You know, if you want to have a little bit more representation here and there and things that are illustrated, I don't really have a problem with that. But the emphasis on it to the point where we're only going to read books that are representative of people who are not the majority population is, I just think that is missing the mark. The premise is you can't learn without this. And when you get more and more granular with that message in tow, you're telling the student, here's your excuse. Well, I couldn't learn because it wasn't granular enough. Instead of universality, instead of saying, you know, learn, you're a human being with the capacity for reason, and you don't have it, if there's not a special need that we've identified, you can learn. You don't need it to look a certain way or be all, you know, special, precious for you. And I think we're just making incredibly brittle, fragile people.
Despite educators' best effort to reach students during the pandemic, there is still a lot of support our students need. Students from already historically underserved backgrounds have faced disproportionate trauma as a result of the pandemic. And unfortunately, this trauma impacts how students show up in the classroom. As our students transition back to school, their well-being should be our top priority for learning to effectively happen. Thus, providing mental health services like counselors, social workers, and psychologists.
Here we go again with the counselors and social workers.
Psychologists in schools can help level the playing field for our students, helping them work through the struggles that can make it harder to focus on learning.
To us at Student Voice, and
I want you guys to listen to her, because this was terrifying to me. I don't know, maybe I'm overreacting, but I found her to be scary.
From already historically underserved
backgrounds, blah blah. Sorry.
Trauma as a result of the pandemic, and unfortunately, this trauma impacts.
Oh my God, I gotta stop.
Continue now.
Whoa, not there.
Social workers.
Equity means centering the voices of those most marginalized by our current education system: students of color, low-income students, students with disabilities, and more. We are the sole stakeholder group with the lived experience of learning in the context of our world's current challenges.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? We are the sole stakeholder group with the lived experience of learning in the context of our world's challenges. That's an astounding statement to me. First of all, that she sees people in those groups as stakeholder groups. Like, these are, forget individuality. This woman, this girl, she's a student, by the way, zombified. This is where we're headed, is to students who are in these groups thinking of themselves this way. We are the only ones who understand whatever. Okay? We're the sole stakeholder group with the lived experience of learning in the context of our world's challenges. You don't even know what you are saying. Now we must be essential partners in developing policies and plans to make schools more thriving and equitable place. As a student, I hope to see more student partnership and voice in efforts to advance equity.
Now more than ever, we must be essential partners in developing policies and plans to make schools more thriving and equitable places. As a student, I hope to see more student partnership and voice in efforts to advance equity.
Basically, she's saying, I want to see more student activism, is what she's saying. All right. So that concludes the sharing portion of this, because it only goes on and gets more stupid from there, I got to say. So I got to unshare this, stop screen. Okay. And get this back over. Sorry, guys. All right. So I don't know if you learned anything from that or got anything out of it. We've been at this for 2 hours, But yeah, she just discounted other people's lived experiences. And yeah, well, Lou, she's a zombie because what she just said doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. We're the sole stakeholder group, blah, 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 blah. No, you're not. Everybody had problems at the end of this year. Everybody did. Everybody experienced it. What you just saw was our U.S. Department of Education erasing the lived experience of anybody who didn't fit into these categories that they named. The lowest, the most at risk, all of this stuff, the historically marginalized, all of that. And don't hear me saying that, oh, I want these people to suffer and I don't care about their needs. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying all children have value. They do. And it is not their fault if they were born into a family where mom and dad are at home and they aren't at risk of starving to death or whatever. I mean, they have a laundromat down the street or they have laundry in the house. That doesn't make them less needy or, of the school's attention, especially to their academics. These scores for reading and math are not so good in these populations either. But we keep catering, to all of these needs and we're going to have equity. Equity is supposed to mean, as she said, every student gets what they need when they need it. Every student. I heard nothing at this summit, at this little seminar thing, whatever it was, to indicate that they care about every student. And maybe I'm missing it. But I really didn't hear that. I heard a lot about a segment of society. And I heard concern about the people who are leaving it, in the sense that we don't want them to leave, but we've just erased their existence. We're the sole stakeholder group, the most at-risk people. We need to bring in the parents and hear from them of what they need for their kids. Well, I got to tell you, I know parents who are banging down the door of schools nationwide saying, talk to me about my kid. My kid has special needs. My kid needs this, or my kid has dyslexia, or my kid doesn't have special needs, but my kid can't read. My kid is in 3rd grade. My kid is in 4th grade and is failing all the tests, and there's nothing clinically wrong with them. There's nothing organically wrong with them. You have failed. They don't want to hear from those parents. They're not interested in those parents. They want to talk to you about your laundry and whether or not you have a ride to school and all that. And then they put people like me in the unenviable position of saying, oh, you sound like you don't want these people to be taken care of. No, I sound like every taxpayer pays for this stuff, some more than others. And the ones who are paying more than others are not getting any services because you have literally said, and we missed it. It was somewhere in there, probably fast forwarded through it, but there was something the guy from Miami said in there. And if I find it, I'll try to clip it, where he said, we just have to face it. The definition of equity is those who have less get more. They made it clear, our federal government, those who have less get more. That works in your house with your children. When you have siblings in your house and you're like, hey, it's like the home is not going to be a perfectly egalitarian situation. Not everybody gets exactly the same amount of Christmas presents or whatever, or exactly the same amount of mommy and daddy's attention every minute of every day, because that's not how life works. It's not how life works out in the real world. So ironically, they're saying to people who have an equal right to equal access to education and equal access to the teachers and the learning materials and to have a voice, you don't, by our definition of need, you don't need. So go away. Okay? And that is exactly upside down from talking to people when you have academics and some kids are doing well because they don't have those needs. And they're just saying now, like, you don't matter. You're bringing up our scores to where they're not in the garbage can, but you don't matter. We're going to take away advanced math. We're going to take away AP classes. We're going to take away this and that because we got to make room for social emotional learning and a laundromat and a healthcare center and counselors and all this other stuff. Sorry, you can't have calculus anymore, California. You can't have advanced math anymore. But, and then they make me out to be like I'm the ogre because I'm trying to advocate for those kids and those families who have an equal right to this. That's what equality under the law means. It doesn't mean everybody gets exactly the same resources and exactly the same stuff, but it sure as heck doesn't mean those who need more get more. In fact, that's exactly what it doesn't need. It means some people are going to end up having better outcomes than others because they have an input too. They bring something to the table. They show up or they don't show up. And I didn't hear anything in that. And I promise, you just have to trust me, I guess. If you want, I can give you the link to the little private video that has it all if you're really a masochist and want to watch it. But there's nothing in there that indicated to me that the students have any kind of, there's going to be any accountability there for their parents or even for the teachers. I didn't hear anything about accountability. I didn't hear anything about oversight for IDEA. I didn't hear anything that told me that this was evidence-based, that any of these premises check out. They're just assuming. They're assuming it was a pandemic. People have learning loss. People have this trauma. They're probably right. But do they really know? Do they really know that what they want in response to that trauma is this like touchy-feely, in your face, I'm in your business, giving you all this care, as opposed to we're going to get down to business. We're going to learn and we're going to like get down to it so you guys get some better grades next year. Do they even know? And when they go, we're going to go ask the parents. Do the parents really know? Do the parents really know what they need? You're the educators. You're supposed to know. We have the data. How are you looking at the data? So anyway, what has mathematics ever done for us? Yeah. How dare we advocate for mathematics? How dare we do that? It just, anyway. And it really is like, Patrick, it really is like telling students, we'll take away any marks from the good students, give to the weak students. When you tell people like me that those who those who need more, get more, and you're the government, you're saying we reserve the right, even though there's a constitution and it's your tax dollars, we reserve the right to decide who needs what. Does that sound like a little book that was written by a guy named Carl once upon a time? Remember? Each according to his needs. Sounds awfully, awfully familiar to me. So anyway, thank you guys for sticking with me. When this is done and up online, I'm going to go in and cut off that front part. Well, the mess of trying to get online and stuff, I'm going to cut it off. I don't think any of that was really valuable, so that we can just start at the beginning. I hope nobody minds. I'll check and make sure that there's nothing of super duper value, maybe tomorrow. But thank you all for coming. Thank you for participating, for your questions, for your comments throughout. I wish I could have gotten to more. Let me scroll back and make sure I didn't miss. I think there were a couple super chats. I don't know if I can even see them. I apologize. I think they're too far back. But let's see. And like I said, if I come off sounding cold or uncaring about children, please don't hear that. I lose sleep. I don't sleep because of what's being done to our nation's children. And that's every child. These kids can't help it where they were born and who their parents are and what's going on. That is so not their fault. And I want them to be able to learn and I want them to have an education. I'm just so angry at the system. I'm angry at the government and I'm angry at the lies. And they are making, this is a giant cover up for their failures to make it about all this new gobbledygook that sounds so good. It sounds so lovey-dovey wonderful, but it's not what these kids need, in my opinion. I mean, I'm not the know-it-all of everything, but when I think about kids who've left these schools, kids who have real problems, kids who even, come from poverty and they've said, this doesn't work for me. I'm just going to homeschool. I'm going to stay home. My mom lost her job anywhere. What they're doing it. They're getting by and they're doing better. They're doing better. They really need to talk to these people and find out why. And I doubt it's because mom is spending half the day talking about the repressors and talking about how the school across town has better resources, or talking about how unfair that is, or talking about the evil, awful colonial powers of old, or how, terrible a guy Christopher Columbus was. I don't think that's how they're doing it. I think they're doing it the good old fashioned way. Let's read, let's do some math. Let's learn. It's really not all that complicated. I think they're overcomplicating it and they're definitely overspending. So thank you guys. And I'll see you next time. Next live is going to be Monday. Christopher Paisley will be here to talk about the hot button topic that might get my butt kicked, which is the difference between confronting anti-white racism when it specifically happens, like Mark Lamont Hill, Joy Reid, people like that, where they are clearly anti-white. I mean, there's statistically they are being racist in that way. And white identitarianism, which is a completely different thing. And even there, the difference between that and supremacy, which they're two different things. But Christopher Paisley is an expert on whiteness studies and multicultural education. He's currently a Philadelphia school teacher. He has a channel that you should check out called Inside White Fragility. He wrote a book, Exploring White Fragility, and he's a fantastic guy. And he's going to be on Monday at 3 p.m. So I hope you will join me for that. Thanks. Have a great evening.